All right, this hour we're going to be talking the U.S. Senate race. Of course, former Governor Robert Bentley, I had to say his name, I'm sorry, appointed Luther Strange to the former Senate seat held by Jeff Sessions, now U.S. Attorney General. Kay Ivey comes in, changes the election date, makes the primary in August. The actual election will be in December, the special election. And we've got all kinds of candidates running. We're going to break it down this hour and talk about the U.S. Senate race. Right now, we are lucky to have with us on the phone from Alabama's 5th District, Congressman Mo Brooks, who announced today that he is running for this U.S. Senate seat. Representative Brooks, welcome to Yellowhammer Radio. How are you, sir?
My pleasure. Doing very well. Running across the state today from the Tennessee Valley to Birmingham to qualify, so I'm headed in your direction, then to Montgomery, then to Mobile.
Sound like a busy guy today. Well, we all three, Chris Reed, Andrea Tice, and yours truly, have lots of questions to talk to you today, but I'm just going to throw it out there out of the gate. One, congratulations on jumping in, because that's a brave thing to jump in, but two, why Mo Brooks? Why Mo Brooks for Senate?
Well, there are a lot of different factors that I think distinguish myself from any of the other candidates that are in this race, and if I were to sum them up, it would be that I am the only candidate with a proven conservative leadership record. If you look at what I've done as a state legislator, as a Madison County District Attorney and Tuscaloosa Assistant District Attorney, as a Madison County Commissioner, and as a member of the United States Congress, I've got a record you can look at that proves my conservative bona fides. I'm not one of those candidates, and you see them all the time, that talk the talk when they're running for public office. They pretend to be conservative, but then when they get into elected office, all of a sudden they change their stripes. And I can go down a number of different things that justify the statement I've just given to you, if you wish. But that's the bottom line.
No, I
other
would.
Candidate has that proven conservative leadership record.
Okay, Representative Brooks, then just give me two of those items that you would put on the table as opposed to the other candidate who's up against you, let's say Luther Strange. He's definitely in, and he's the one who would also cite his bona fides and his record. So what would you lay down, let's say, just against him?
Sure. I've been in the United States Congress for 6 years. On the issue of border security, there are organizations that evaluate your congressional record, how well you've done in actually doing what you would say you were going to do.
Uh-huh.
In that vein, Numbers USA, which is the foremost evaluator of border security records in Congress, has given me a perfect score for 6 straight years, 100% A+. No one else can point to that kind of record on border security issues. I would also add that there are special interest groups that want to dramatically flood the market, both with lawful immigrants and illegal aliens, because they want to suppress wages in order to increase their profits. You won't find those folks in my camp during this election.
That was the big thing that Sessions was about during his tenure in the Senate. He was very big about protecting the working class. But also, Congressman Brooks, I believe the Heritage Foundation they gave you in the mid-'90s, I think you and Gary were about even in the last one I looked at as far as a conservative ranking, and they're sort of the gold standard, the one that I look at since I used to work at Heritage. So, I mean, I don't think there's any question as to your conservative bona fides, but I'm curious, do you think this election is going to be about the issues, what distinguishes you all, or do you think it's going to be more about personality issues?
Well, unquestionably, personalities will be a factor. They always are. How someone looks, how they talk, whether they smile enough, whether they wink at you. Those kinds of things affect some voters more so than others. To me, public policy is what counts, because that's your job description in Washington, D.C. Are you doing what America needs doing in order to enhance the prospects of a better tomorrow? And in that vein, there's one issue where I stand out versus anybody else. Not just border security, but this one is perhaps the biggest issue facing our country, and that's our deficits and accumulated debt and the threat that poses to the solvency of the federal government. I have a long track record of trying to reduce government spending, much more so than the vast majority of people in the United States Congress, and I will continue that if the people of Alabama should decide to put me in the United States Senate.
Your record can be looked at and the things you've said. I mean, we can examine that, and those are truthful statements. You know, we've watched your representation in Congress, but if elected to U.S. Senate, what will be your primary goals as a U.S. Senator?
Well, what I did in the United States Congress on the House side is exactly what I would try to do as a United States Senator. The difference is, in the House, you're one person out of 435. In the Senate, you're one person out of 100. More importantly, you're looking at a 52 to 48 margin in the Senate where every senator's vote counts. And with that, you have leverage. You can insist, by way of example, that we be more financially responsible, or else the spending bill is not going to pass because you can hold it up. There are procedural mechanisms that you have in the Senate that you don't have in the House. Also, there's a closer vote in the Senate than you have in the House. Now, for emphasis, one senator by himself cannot cure all ills. Neither can one House member. But collectively, if you can get a few people who agree with you about the dangers posed by this out-of-control $20 trillion debt, then you can make a difference. And I'm quite comfortable that with Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and others who share my concern about our out-of-control deficit and debt, that we will be able to form a coalition that will be able to constructively make America's future better, as opposed to the debilitating insolvency and bankruptcy we're now headed towards.
Our guest is Congressman Mo Brooks from Alabama's 5th District, who announced today he is going to be running for U.S. Senate here in Alabama.
Congressman Brooks, we talked briefly regarding whether or not the Senate should just eliminate the filibuster for everything, especially legislation. What position do you take on that, and why?
Well, I'm one of those that disagree with arcane Senate rules that thwart the will of the majority of the American people. Right now, you've got a minority of Democrats in the United States Senate that can stop almost everything in the United States Senate. That means that a minority of United States senators are blocking the will of a majority of the United States senators and the people who elected them. The minority in the United States Senate is blocking the will of the majority of the House of Representatives and the millions of Americans who elected them, and a minority of the United States Senate is blocking the will of the President of the United States, who is duly elected. So that's one thing we have to focus on, is getting rid of this filibuster rule. If you look at the history, it was an accident. It happened in the early 1800s, and it took a considerable period of time before anyone realized that the interplay of those rules created a filibuster environment, that could be used as a tool by one or two senators back then to stop the United States Senate from operations. So I agree with the elimination of the filibuster rule with respect to Supreme Court justice appointments. I also think at a minimum, with respect to spending bills that have to take place in order to prevent a federal government shutdown, mandatory legislation, there should be no filibuster right that empowers a minority to force a government shutdown. And then on a public policy level, I prefer that we not have a Senate filibuster capability with respect to public policy matters, but I'm not as hardline on that as I am with respect to spending bills that we must pass or else have a government shutdown. And what you've seen the Democrats do in the United States Senate is they have used that threat of a government shutdown to intimidate Republicans in the Senate to funding things that should not be funded, and to not funding things that should be funded. By way of example, border security and the wall, it's that minority in the United States Senate that is preventing the government of the United States from reflecting the will of the American people and spending the money that is necessary to provide border security. A minority in the Senate is doing that. That's not right. That's not a democracy.
Let me just ask you this. Being a senator, you have to know a lot about foreign policy. As far as your foreign policy experience and knowledge, how would you distinguish yourself from Luther Strange or Mo Brooks or anybody? Not you. I mean Luther Strange and the other candidates in this that are currently running for Senate.
Well, let me be clear about something. I don't want this campaign to be negative, although it's quite clear that the swamp in Washington is going to make it negative, as evidenced by the NRSC already attacking people and their ability to put together proper campaigns. The NRSC is trying to bully Alabamians into not running for the United States Senate and not offering themselves, thereby hoping to control the vote. Same thing with the Senate Leadership Fund and what they have most recently done in trying to create this environment in which somebody may have done something wrong, and contacting Governor Ivey and having the audacity to ask her to have an election like the statute requires. Okay? Now, for the life of me, I don't understand why the Senate Leadership Fund is taking the position that they're taking. I call them the Washington swamp critters. But having said all that, I am not going to talk about myself in a direct contrast with anybody else running. I'm going to run a positive campaign about Mo Brooks. The only time I'll deviate from that is when one of those Washington swamp critters or one of the candidates that those swamp critters support starts attacking me. Then I'll respond. Now, just focusing about my record on foreign policy experience, since that's what you originally asked, I serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So I've been involved in legislation and hearings regarding foreign policy matters. Nobody else has that experience.
Congressman Mo Brooks is our guest, and we appreciate you being on from Alabama's 5th District. I want to talk to you, Congressman Brooks, about some of the things you mentioned moments ago. You referred to them as the Washington swamp critters. We've been hearing from sources that basically the insiders in Washington are actually asking people to steer clear of challenging Luther Strange for that seat, and those that assist candidates in running might not get work in Republican races in the future. Did you have any problem putting together your staff or campaign out of fear that they might not find work in the future if they went against Luther Strange?
I've talked with 2 candidates or potential candidates, and they lost their campaign staff as a result of the NRSC threats, the Washington swamp critters threats, that you will no longer have any business with the National Republican Senatorial Committee or even perhaps Republican senators if you support any candidate running for this office other than the swamp's preferred candidate.
Wow. See, that is insane to me.
That is the kind of intimidation and strong-armed bullying tactics that I think are counterproductive, and they undermine our republic.
So why do you think we're seeing that, Congressman, when we've got a hand-chosen person in that seat? Luther Strange is not an incumbent. I mean, I find this rather weird.
Well, technically, he's a placeholder under the law, and he is to hold that place, Jeff Sessions' place, until such time as an election. And that's what the special election is all about. You'd have to ask someone up there why they put these blinders on and why they're so committed to the position that they're committed to. All I can say is that they were not able to intimidate me, and I am going to run, and I'm going to offer myself to the American people. And if the people of Alabama in particular, if they want a United States senator who keeps his word, then I hope that they will put me in the position to replace Jeff Sessions as the next senator of the great state of Alabama.
So, Congressman Brooks, I just want to be clear. You currently have staff that are committed to joining your campaign and seeing you through to the end of this, but you're saying that other candidates, people who have announced that they're going to run for the Senate seat, have lost their staff as a result of certain veiled threats, really, if you want to. Or maybe,
well, they weren't veiled; they were open threats.
Yeah, maybe not even veiled. Just outright.
I have hired a general consultant. I have hired a fundraiser. I do have someone who will assist with media. We were doing some production for ads today. I have not yet hired a global media person, nor have I hired a professional pollster. And we're going to see how the fundraising comes in and how best to allocate our monies. Now, to be clear, I stated a little bit different than you stated it. I said that 2 candidates or potential candidates have lost their staffs due to these NRSC threats, the Washington swamp critters threats. I have not said that they have publicly announced yet that they are running, and I really don't want to identify them by name. I'll let them talk about it as they wish.
Okay.
Sure.
But clearly the backroom machinations are underway as far as the establishment in D.C. trying to,
sure.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, let's be clear what's really going on behind the scenes. You're talking about tens of millions of dollars that change hands in Washington, D.C., from special interest groups and lobbyists to the campaigns, either individual campaigns or campaign organizations, super PAC type entities, in exchange for favors that are granted of a legislative nature. Okay? Now, some of that money, to be fair, some of that money is given to particular senators simply because special interest groups agree with positions that those senators or House members have taken during their time in public office. But a lot of that money is given in order to influence senators to do the wrong thing for our country and in favor of special interest groups. And so by and large, I would submit that the money that will be spent in Washington, D.C. by super PACs is special interest group money that's trying to adversely affect the desire of Alabamians to elect a senator who's going to place Alabama and America first. These special interest groups, they want themselves placed first. They want that spigot, that flow of money into their pockets to continue. And the best way to do that is to put in power a United States senator that will open those floodgates so that they can feed at that trough. Now, there's a really good book I encourage people to read. It's by Congressman Ken Buck. It just came out last month. It's called Drain the Swamp. And it goes into great detail about the connection between leadership positions and how much you have to pay to hold those leadership positions. And in order to get the money to pay for those leadership positions, of course, you have to raise it. In order to raise it, all too often you have to promise special favorable treatment to special interest groups that have the money that they can pour into these campaign coffers. I can give you another specific example that people could look up that was on the front page of USA Today involving Congressman Thomas Massey if you want, but it's really up to you as to how much detail you want in support of my statement.
Congressman Brooks, we've got to take a break. Can you hang with us for about 3 minutes during the break, and we can keep you around until the bottom of the hour? All right, our guest is Congressman Mo Brooks from Alabama's 5th District, U.S. senatorial candidate. We'll be right back on Yellowhammer Radio. Welcome back to Yellowhammer Radio. I am Scott Chambers. She is Andrea Tice. Chris Reed co-hosting with us each and every Monday. Our guest from Alabama's 5th Congressional District, Congressman Mo Brooks, who is running for the U.S. Senate seat formerly held by now Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Congressman Brooks, thanks for holding with us. I want to get back to what you were saying before the break. Sorry we had to put you on hold, sir.
Sure. A really good example of what I'm talking about involved Congressman Thomas Massey from Kentucky. Thomas is a libertarian-oriented Republican, and there was an article in USA Today, I think it was last summer, and this is basically what was described by Thomas Massey. There was a special interest group lobbyist that wanted him to take a particular position on a particular issue. And that lobbyist told Thomas Massey that if you will vote as I want you to do as I want you to do, I will raise all the money necessary to get you on the House Ways and Means Committee, which is a powerful committee. And Thomas Massey, being the trustworthy public servant that he is, he said no. I'm not going to do that. And then Thomas Massey took a step further and talked publicly about it, and hence the article in USA Today about how lobbyists are trying to buy our votes up there on a regular basis, and the system is set up such that if you want a leadership position, particularly in the House, you've got to actually pay money to get them. And I complimented Thomas Massey about that on the House floor for going public. I've been doing the same thing periodically. And he said, well, yeah, Mo, but I made one really big mistake. And I go, Congressman Massey, what was that mistake? He said, well, I talked about it in terms of how he was offering to help me buy a committee assignment on Ways and Means. And that's not really true. It's a rental agreement. You have to keep paying to keep it. And that gives you an idea of what I call the corruption of the public policy debate. And in that vein, I want to mention something to all your listeners. If you truly want someone who is independent of the swamp critters in Washington, D.C., you have to participate in helping to get that person elected, whether it be me or somebody else. Okay. And I've opened up a website, mobrooksforsenate.com, mobrooksforsenate.com, spelled exactly like it sounds, and you can assist my candidacy by contributing to that website, whether it's $10, $25, $50 or $100. Now, as you ponder whether to help, I want to emphasize something about my track record, and I don't think I've mentioned it on this show yet. But I have been elected 4 times to the legislature, 4 times as a county commissioner, and 4 times to the United States Congress. That means 9 times I stood for re-election. In those 9 re-election efforts, whether it be Republican primaries or general elections. In every single instance, the people sent me back to hold that public office with a victory margin of at least 30 percentage points.
Wow.
And the reason I emphasize that is that the people up here in the Tennessee Valley who elect me to public office, they know my track record, and they like it, as evidenced by the overwhelming votes, 9 different times, 3 different offices, to send me back to service in public office. And so I hope people will consider that. Now, when these attack ads come, and they're going to come from the moneyed interests in Washington, D.C., the people who want business as usual, who want to be able to buy congressmen and senators with their monetary influence, when the time comes where I'm under severe attack, and I will be, people in South Alabama and the middle part of Alabama don't know me as well as the people in the Tennessee Valley.
Right.
Please contact people in the Tennessee Valley and ask for their opinion on who I am as a person and whether I do what I say I'm going to do, and with respect to what I do, whether you believe that's in the best interest of our country and state.
All right, Congressman Brooks, we appreciate you being on. We're up. We've got a break in 15 seconds. Our computer will cut us off. Thanks for being with us on Yellowhammer Radio. We look forward to chatting with you throughout the senatorial race, sir. Have a great day.
I look forward to it at your leisure.
All right, Congressman
so
Mo
much.
Brooks. Jay Holland's got news next.